Hello and welcome to another episode of the Contract Warrior podcast. In this episode, we're going to do a quick review of the request for equitable adjustment known as an REA. My name is Christopher Williams. I am a former contracting officer of 17 years. My experience involves cradle-to-grave contracting, that's pre-award, post-award, to include REAs and claims. And before we jump into the episode, just know if you want to understand more about your contracting officer, how to better communicate, and how to better navigate the contract requirements, head on over to thinklikeyourko.com. I put a great training together that's free. It's available for you to absorb and to apply, and you will do a much better job with your contract in terms of administration. It's absolutely a game changer for federal contractors. Now let's jump into this episode and let's start with a situation, a scenario. It's a very common scenario where a federal contractor who has a federal contract and therefore has time and money on contract with a particular deliverable and therefore has a binding agreement with a contracting officer. Now, at any time during that contract, when there's communication, there are essentially 4 layers of communication. There's traditional emails where you're going to go ahead and have correspondence back and forth in support of that contract and all the logistics associated. None of that is out of the ordinary. All of that is in stride of the requirements that exist currently, right? Nothing's a shock. Everything's good to go. It's courtesy emails about being on site, where the laydown area is, what have you. And then from there, you have the second form of communication, which is the formation of RFIs, where the contractor may identify something that is not within the contract or within the requirements or requires a clarification of something that's cardinal and which has time and money associated. It's a game changer, and this needs to be addressed to the contracting officer. That would be the usage of an RFI, requesting for information directly to the KO in post-award, right? You've also seen this in pre-award prior to contract award. Those RFIs provided by contractors who are competing or even in a sole source environment, they're identifying cardinal issues and concerns that need to be addressed by the government before you can propose on the requirements. So it's the same in post-award. Now that the contract's awarded, you're performing the contract, there's a cardinal concern. It's time to address that with the contracting officer. Now, you may address it to the contracting officer representative or someone else with the government, but in the end, it's a communication chain that eventually has confirmation by the contracting officer. Then you have, from the RFI, you have the third communication channel, which would lead us to the request for equitable adjustment, or an REA. And this is a package that you would submit to the contracting officer, and this would actually be a formal request for adjustment of costs incurred due to government-directed changes. And the REA package would be submitted right to the contracting officer for their review, and then the contracting officer will utilize the technical team and all the resources available to digest the package that you've provided. Then make a decision, perhaps engage in negotiation, and then walk through resolution of the REA, whether it's a denial or acceptance following negotiation. So that is the third communication. Then you have the fourth communication, which is a claim at the claim level. Now, by explaining all 4 of these communication buckets, if you will, or levels of communication, it identifies several different instances where communication can resolve a lot of concerns in general communication, then RFIs, and then at the end of the day, if your RFI does not become resolved, right, and in fact, there are so many different scenarios that can kind of paint the picture where the contractor might think that they're due some additional consideration because of the outcome of an RFI, or maybe just because the conditions are different after award. It doesn't even take an RFI, right, or an email. But naturally, that communication channel will identify the thought process from you as a contractor to the contracting officer that would then eventually lead to an REA package that package, right? It's a package, would have all that communication in there, and your ability as a prudent contractor to navigate that challenge and the outcome therein caused this consideration. So from there, the contracting officer sees your argument and can go ahead and digest all of your information. Now let's go ahead and talk about what would go into that package. Now that we know what it is and kind of how it works for communication, let's go ahead and talk about what would be in the REA package. First and foremost, you would have a cover page, right, with letterhead and a narrative and supporting data, right? So you must include a detailed narrative that identifies the change and legal entitlement. Also an impact analysis for cost and time, and supporting documentation like invoices, emails, and schedules. Now, your narrative, in a practical sense, in the field offices, when the KO receives REAs, just as I have, and I've in the past in my formal life, right, as a KO, I've denied them and I've approved them. And the justification in which that decision was made, I always provided to the contractor so that they can take that information and go to the next level if they want to towards a claim. So just know that with that narrative, in a practical sense, you're going to capture what happened and what is the legal entitlement. What did you do on behalf of that? Did somebody introduce something and activate the changes clause, right, by giving a verbal? What happened? What took place? And this leads to your time impact analysis. Now, I've had contractors in the past, they say, hey, I don't need to provide a TIA because this is just, it has nothing to do with time. We're not asking for time. The time impact analysis is essential for you as a contractor to demonstrate your mitigation. How did you navigate this challenge? Speak to the activities that are affected, and then how did you navigate the challenges? That is what the KO is looking for. Not just, hey, this happened, we're due this amount, please pay up. No, that doesn't cut it. So just as if you were being audited, just as if you were providing a proposal, just as if you were demonstrating your cost controls and time controls, that's exactly what should be in your REA package. And then that there will be submitted to the KO. If the contracting officer has any questions or the team supporting the KO, it's in your best interest to communicate with them to provide whatever it is that they're looking for. Now, this is important. At the end of the day, when you get that final decision from the contracting officer, it should be from the contracting officer. You can request the contracting officer to respond to your REA. If you're receiving a response from a construction manager or from someone else, or a generic, hey, yeah, we saw that REA and we're moving forward with a mod of like 10 days and 30 grand. That's not what you want. You want a formal recognition from the contracting officer. You want to ensure that that contracting officer is telling you this is the determination, and then that the mod is moving forward. And the estimated time of arrival for that mod, if that consideration is entertained and they're actually going to award some consideration for your REA. And this is very important for you, for your legal team, for the records, but most importantly for the contract file itself, and that it receives a determination from the contracting officer. Now, normally that will happen in a letter. The KO will submit a letter to you, an REA letter that has a determination made by the KO in response to your REA. You'll number your REA, right? Like REA TAC 001, 002, whatever. Keep it sequential so that the government can track it with you. And there you go. You have your REA response. Now, this is just a quick review. There's many scenarios that can go along with this. The timing of your REA is very important. So certain clauses require you to act quickly when it comes to identifying a change in conditions, right? So the changes clause will identify 30 days. You need to notify the KO. Not submit your REA, but notify your KO that there is an REA coming, right? If I was a federal contractor, I would notify the KO with an RFI that there is an REA coming. If I want to do it by letter, I would do it by RFI and attach the letter. Contracting officer, please see attached letter in support of a future REA that's coming within 4 months, right? Within 90 days, 120, whatever. be as accurate as you can so the contracting officer has some bearing in terms of what you're trying to submit, and they can get in preparation to address your REA. And one of the bigger issues is when a contractor waits to the tail end of the project and dumps a bunch of REAs on the contracting office. And some of those issues may have taken place a whole year prior, right? 9 months before, whenever. Just know that a contracting officer is supposed to resolve REAs as soon as reasonable, as soon as they can. They can't always do it, right, really quickly. It's different than a claim. A claim has a shorter fuse, and it's a different world. It's in the land of disputes, right? So it's a lot more contentious. Whereas an REA is sort of a mediation approach, if you will, where you're bringing this forward. The government's going to do their best to answer as quick as they can, but it's not going to be done in 30 days or in 2 weeks. So submitting an REA is not something that the agency should grudge a contractor for. An REA is absolutely a model in the contract that is acceptable to provide that release, right? That release of changing conditions. Otherwise, you would go straight from contract award to claim. The REA fits right in the middle to create that buffer to have a bit of a mediation, if you will, in order to dialogue, negotiate, and figure out where we're at. That's the best way to navigate any kind of challenges that come up and how to do that, especially in a firm fixed price environment, right? You have a firm fixed price proposal. Let's say you proposed $100,000 and the project ended up costing you, $70,000 to do, the government's not looking for a rebate against your $30,000, right? There's nothing like that. However, if the project jumps over $100,000 and goes to like 130 or 150, and there's a reason for that because there was a change in conditions, then obviously, your REA is going to shore up that extra $50,000 based on those conditions that changed and all the details associated. And the contracting officer is going to take a look at your package when you submit it. Can the government stop you from submitting an REA? No. An REA can be provided at any time, but you do have to follow these clauses where they identify these short fuse notifications, right? Like I mentioned, the changes clause, you have 30 days to get your notice to the KO. So be mindful of those type of triggers, if you will, or red lines where when the REA is going to be reviewed, that'll be taken into consideration. Did they fall in alignment with the clause itself? Did they notify the government? But I will add that it doesn't mean your REA is going to be thrown in the garbage. That's not the case at all. Your REA is still going to be digested by the KO. It's just that everything is taken into account regarding the merit and then the allowance of your REA, right? Allowable, allocable, reasonable. So allowable would be the authority and that 30-day mark, and then the conditions, right, in the situation. Allocable would be ensuring that it fits the project, that it has an anchor point within an activity and the actual deliverable, and then reasonability, the contractor's proposal part of time and money, looking for that type of consideration. Is that reasonable? But the contracting officer doesn't jump on your price first and your time first. They run it through that filter: allowable, allocable, and reasonable. Defense Contract Shield can't possibly close the gap, but we are absolutely here to help. That's why the training came in, right? Think Like Your KO training and the course is to help close the gap so you can take the training and the course, do it all in your own space, right? You don't have to ask me to come in and do it physically with you, which will cost more money. So the training is there for everyone to utilize it if they need it, right? If they want to learn more. So it's priceless. It's cheaper than hiring a contract specialist, that's for sure. So hopefully that was very helpful for those who are really not clear about REAs and can use a little guidance on how that applies to them in their contract. Now, if you have any questions and if you really want to know how to communicate to your contracting officer, I encourage you to take the training I put together, and you can go to thinklikeyourko.com and take that free training. It's absolutely instrumental. And so with that said, thanks for your time, and we'll see you on another episode.